When I left for my deployment in Eastern Europe, I trusted that my quiet suburban neighborhood would be the same when I came home. My wife had moved in with her sister during my absence, and our home, a modest two-story house I'd bought after my first overseas tour, sat empty but maintained. I even paid a neighbor to mow the lawn and keep an eye on the place. But 3 months into my deployment, I got the call. Our home was gone, burned to the ground. And the worst part, the HOA was behind it. I'm Captain Marcus Ellison, U.S. Army, third-generation service. I've been deployed 5 times, and every time my wife and I have made sacrifices. But this time, the enemy wasn't foreign. It was a group of clipboard tyrants in my own HOA, the board of Willow Glen Estates. My wife Casey had moved to her sister's place in Asheville to be closer to family while I was overseas. We'd notified the HOA about the temporary vacancy and submitted all paperwork. The bills were paid, the yard was trimmed, and our flag, the American flag, flew proudly on the front porch. That flag would end up being part of their twisted excuse. It started with passive-aggressive letters claiming the house looked abandoned. Then they claimed the porch flag violated non-standard mounting protocol. But since my wife wasn't physically there, we didn't always catch the letters in time. What we didn't know, the HOA board, led by Meredith Klein, a woman with a God complex and a hatred of anything not part of her HGTV aesthetic, had voted to classify her home as a nuisance structure. 3 days later, they hired a private demolition contractor. No county approval, no court order, just a backroom vote and a forged public safety risk letter submitted to the local fire marshal. But it gets worse. While inspecting the house, the contractor's team used an industrial heat torch in the attic. Something sparked. The insulation caught fire. Within 20 minutes, our home was in flames. They didn't even call 911 until a neighbor saw smoke and phoned it in. By then, it was too late. My wife called me sobbing. I thought she'd been in an accident. Instead, I learned that everything we owned, uniforms, medals, letters, our dog's ashes, was gone. When the investigation started, the fire chief found out the HOA had falsified documents. They'd claimed we abandoned the property, which was a blatant lie. We had proof, paid utilities, lawn service receipts, and the email where we explicitly informed them of my deployment. But they weren't sorry. When my wife showed up at the HOA meeting to confront them, Meredith smirked and said, "Maybe next time don't leave your house looking like a war zone." That's when I snapped. My commanding officer filed the paperwork. 3 weeks later, with my deployment wrapped up, I arrived back in North Carolina, not alone, but in a 6-vehicle convoy. 3 of us, all officers, pulled in with our trucks and Humvees in full military dress. We were within our rights. Federal law protects active-duty military from local property violations. And even more critically, the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERA, and the Service Members Civil Relief Act, SCA, forbid actions like foreclosure, eviction, or seizure of property without a court order while someone is deployed. We had a military legal officer deliver a cease and desist directly to the HOA president's door. We also filed civil and criminal charges. The fallout was swift and brutal. Meredith and 2 board members were arrested for falsifying public documents, unauthorized demolition, and reckless endangerment. The HOA's insurance dropped them immediately. We sued and won a $1.75 million settlement, which included rebuilding the home exactly as it was, plus compensation for everything lost inside. But most poetic of all, the court ordered the HOA to issue a public apology publishable in 3 local newspapers, and to fly an American flag on every mailbox in the neighborhood for 1 year. Today, I live in my newly rebuilt home, and I made one addition, a 30-foot flagpole installed right in the center of my front yard. And beneath that flag, a bronze plaque that reads, "In memory of what was lost and the strength that returned." The HOA tried to erase me while I was overseas fighting for their freedom, but they forgot. Soldiers come back and we don't forget.